Let's see who accepts the stream. Twitch has accepted the stream. YouTube has accepted the stream. Facebook has accepted the stream. You gonna do your silence now?
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let's do silence and then I'm ready.
All right. Tell me when the silence starts. Can I start the timer?
Yeah.
Okay, when it says on the air, you're on the air.
Hello, Think Twice Radio, and welcome to another episode of the Metachewy live stream. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm Metachewy, and this is my live stream. So, today's show, obviously, today is the election day, so I guess I probably have to acknowledge that. I mean, most people are probably tuned in election stuff, but I guess I might ramble a little bit there, but I think the media is probably doing a good job to cover that. So a couple things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Taro Sugimoto. So coming up on November 16th is Taro Sugimoto's 70th birthday. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a legend and the myth of Taro Sugimoto. And I think I'll be coming out on his birthday. That's the goal, is to actually come out with a pop song or a demo about Taro Sugimoto. So on his birthday, I'm in the process of actually laying down a demo track about Taro Sugimoto. And yeah, his birthday is on the 16th. So I'll talk a little bit about his legend, and then that has led me to studying, pretty deeply the last week or two, Japanese music. So specifically, I think it's called Mugen Noh, which is kind of a type of Japanese theater. So I'll try to regurgitate some of the stuff I've learned about that while it's on the tip of my mind. And then also at some point in the show, I'll talk a little bit about the Bitcoin cycle. So I think we're all familiar with kind of American democracy. And obviously with today being the election, we know that once every 4 years we elect a new president. And there's something similar in Bitcoin, that once every 4 years a halving occurs. So I'll kind of make the analogy of the Bitcoin cycle with the presidential cycle. So let's get started. So yeah, we got somebody, for those that are watching the later recording, we have people commenting live. We have Nick's World, who's one of our top viewers, says, from viewers like you, thank you, and Trump or Harris. So I will not disclose who I voted for, but I did vote actually right before I came here, and it was kind of bizarre. They changed, the polling location was the same, but they changed where I voted to the back door of the building. So that was kind of interesting. Then we have a comment here. In Japan, there's one type of theater I want to see, and that is the puppetry called bunraku. So I'm not familiar with bunraku, but maybe I'll start here with Mugen Noh and a little bit about Mugen Noh. So I've been studying Japanese music, I guess, in preparation for launching I guess it's a folk pop song about Taro Sugimoto. So I think when you think of Japanese music, at least the one concept that I've come across is, I think the concept of ja ku ro, or essentially, I think it's Japanese philosophy and design or art. They kind of have this philosophy called Ja-Q-Ro, or it's kind of like a triumvirate or like a trifecta. So I guess as far as I understand it, it's kind of the theory that everything in nature or the world or in music happens in kind of three sets. So there's like kind of a beginning, slow, a slow kind of build up, and then they call it a scattering, and then kind of an excitement. So kind of when you think of, I think kind of the seasons are one example of, right, you have kind of this spring, or you have the winter spring, which is kind of a build up, and then you have the summer, which is kind of, the peak, and then the third part, which is kind of the downfall. So essentially you kind of think of Japanese music as like three sets of the build up, and then everything builds up to the peak at the end. So this concept of three, and actually the rhythm, they have they divide their music up. I think it's the Mitsuji rhythm, which is kind of, if you think of 8 beats, or in Western music they have 4 beats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, so 8 beats. In Japanese music they have kind of a mark on the third beat, which kind of signals the end of the first section, and then on the 7th and 8th. So kind of representing, again, the concept of Ja-Q-Ro. So it's been interesting, I think, studying Japanese music. I think, and then Mugen Noh is kind of their play. So it's kind of Japanese Shakespeare, I guess, is how I'd make the analogy. But you have Japanese literature has kind of this format where they have these large plays where they set stories to music, and kind of the idea of Mugen Noh is when you have story and text come together with sound and visuals, you kind of, when all three of those are working, there's kind of this sweet spot that they aim for of kind of the convergence of all those things. So I think it's been interesting studying Japanese music, and they even have this concept of, I think it's like flexible time and unflexible time. So I think in Western music, right, and I'm not traditionally trained. I took some music classes in middle school, but a lot of it has just been kind of self-learning music. But friends that I have and colleagues that I have that are like classically trained, they really, like, it's almost ingrained in their mind, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the time is very strict, which is Japanese music has that too, of called strict time, but they actually have this concept that I'm drawn to of flexible time. So and I'll try to explain this best I can, but essentially, like when you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, in Japanese performance, someone performing can just hold that 3 for as long as they choose, and until they signal the next beat, that 3 can last as long as they feel like it. So if they were singing, they could go 1, 2, 3, 3, and kind of just hang on 3, and then when they signal the beat, so essentially their rhythms, until the next clap comes, that would signal the time. So it's kind of interesting, right? Because even I had a friend that I've kind of been practicing music with, and they were just commenting how I'm kind of hard to play with because I'm not really on strict times. I think traditionally trained musicians, they really think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they think of that framework. But it's just really interesting to hear or research kind of this other culture that is making music but has a whole other way of thinking of counting time in music, which is the flexible time, which is essentially just holding notes in space and holding time and not continuing the time, but you're counting, but the counting is not in a very strict fashion. It can be kind of spread out and chopped up, which I guess I think if you were trained in Japanese music, it might be easier to play with. But so there's some other kind of ramblings of Japanese music that I've been studying, and I think maybe I'll debut a little bit of my folk song that I have here. So I think essentially, again, going with the Ja-Q-Ro philosophy, really the folk song that I think there's a philosopher, a quote that goes, "People don't have ideas, ideas have people." And I think this idea of Taro Sugimoto has been a song or been an idea that has had me for a while. And essentially, again, coming back to the Ja-Q-Ro philosophy, the kind of the 3 sections of my song are, the first section is really a text kind of introduction to kind of the mythology of Taro Sugimoto. So it starts with a verse about a prophecy, and the prophecy of Taro Sugimoto bringing the Stanley Cup to Buffalo, and that he was going to bring world peace. And then the second verse is, again, text in this first section is about his playing style, and that he was, the great one, or had the attributes of Gretzky or Mario Lemieux. And then really the intermission then is really about his being drafted. So he was drafted 123rd overall in 1974. And so really that section, and essentially, it was a joke. So that's the third section. And then really the climax coming back to the Jaiku Road. The row section has two parts. The chorus is "We Want Taro." So "We Want Taro," which is a saying that the Sabres fans, they'd start chanting when Sabres games would get out of hand back in the day. So if the Sabres were getting blown out, they would just, and the fans were kind of upset or bored, they would just start chanting "We want Taro, we want Taro" in the auditorium. So that's the chorus. That's definitely the chorus of the song. And then it kind of fades out with me just doing improvised "Taro says" chants. So "Taro says" it's again, coming back to the Sabres fans, there's this group called the Phantom Sign Makers, and they would hand paint signs that said, and every sign started "Taro says." So "Taro says," and then they would add some sort of witty or punny remark afterwards. They'd say things like, "Taro says that blue cheese is better than ranch." That might be the sign for a game. And then another game, it might be "Taro says that there were no WMDs." So it could really be anything. They were hockey related, they were political related, and there's actually I did some research on the Phantom Sign Makers, and apparently there's an actual book. You can kind of think of the Bible of the Phantom Sign Makers that has a recording of every single "Taro says" sign that I would love to have digitized. So I think that's maybe something of my songwriting process that I'll eventually. I would love to have my eyes on it, maybe digitize the actual "Taro says" and incorporate legitimate "Taro says" signs and lyrics into my song. On the 16th is his birthday, and I guess I'll be releasing what I will call a pop version of the song. I think I'll only have one song, and it will be Taro. Taro will be the song, and I think performing that one song many different ways. I think eventually maybe develop some sort of actually long form play, but I think I'm at the point in my artistry that I just need to get something out. I can't really think, and I need to put something out. So it's kind of my thinking. And his 70th birthday is kind of the perfect time for me to launch this song that I've had. So that's a little bit about my music, but let's talk a little bit about Taro Sugimoto. So who is Taro Sugimoto? So Taro Sugimoto was the first Japanese ice hockey player drafted into the National Hockey League. So he was drafted by the Buffalo Sabres in the 1974 NHL amateur draft with the 183rd pick overall. He was a center iceman for the Tokyo Katanas from the Japanese International Hockey League. And he was most famous for being the first Japanese ice hockey player drafted to the Hockey League. And Taro is most famous for not actually existing. So Taro is not a real person. It was kind of an inside joke. So the Sabres, they drafted Taro Sugimoto. At this time the NHL was being there was a competitor called the WHA, so the World Hockey Association. It was kind of this rival upstart league, and the NHL was at a point where they tried to keep or had to keep their drafts secret because they didn't want information about the players they were courting or players they were trying to get into their league. They wanted to keep it secret, so they had this really long drawn out process about drafting players. So essentially this was, I think, done all via telephone. So there were 16 teams, and then an NHL commissioner would kind of call team by team and ask, who did you pick? And then take their selection and then call the other teams. And essentially each team would get repeated all the players that had been drafted since they were last on the pick. So it was this really long drawn out process, completely different than the draft now, which is all done in one spot, in person. And it's still slow, but it's much quicker. So This inside joke was kind of done as it was done as a kind of a protest around how ridiculous the NHL draft process was. It was so boring, tedious, and long and drawn out that the Sabres kind of hatched this idea to kind of play a joke and draft a fake player. So it always started with the general manager. So Punch Imlock was kind of thinking, how can we, mess with the commissioner here? We're kind of frustrated. That's when one of the Sabres scouts, or he was their PR director or media guy, he had a lot of roles in the Sabres organization, Paul Wieland. He was kind of a prankster, and he actually wrote this book called, Taro Lives, Confessions of a Sabres Hoaxer. But Paul Wieland had the idea we should draft a player who doesn't exist. So that kind of got some steam, and they kind of quickly put together this archetype of, okay, we're going to draft a fake player. Who should it be? And I mean, they had the idea, okay, we should draft someone from Japan. And so they quickly came up with the idea of Taro Sugimoto. And Sugimoto comes from, there was actually a Sugimoto Gardens and Gift Store out in East Aurora that I think it was Paul Wieland would pass frequently on his way to and from college. I think he lived in Elma or East Aurora at the time. So that is kind of where the Sugimoto came in. And they actually called the owner of Sugimoto's Gardens and Gifts. I think his name was Joshua Sugimoto, and asked him, what's a common boy's name in Japan? And he said, oh, Taro is a common name. So that's where Taro Sugimoto comes from. And then they asked him, okay, well, how do you say sword or saber in Japanese? And he said katana. So that's how they came up with the name of Tokyo Katana. So yes, that's kind of how the birth of Taro Sugimoto came about. And then they thought it was hilarious that once they drafted this player, the commissioner would have to repeat Taro Sugimoto and spell it out 16 times. Spell it out 16 times to the other team. So they got their pick. They picked Taro Sugimoto from the Tokyo Katanas. And yeah, that was the selection. You have to think this was back in the 70s, right? 74. The NHL draft procedure, it's way different now, right? There's so much. This was before the internet. So right now we have the internet. So probably it's really hard. If you're a good hockey player, it's hard to kind of fly under the radar. But this was a time pre-internet that there was literally no scouting. There was no way to really collaborate information, or it kind of passed because, there's no way to verify or not verify that this person existed. So they kind of it was all based on trust of, drafting this guy. So it's kind of a funny moment of pre-internet history of something that wouldn't be able to be today because it would quickly be verified or debunked. But they drafted the Sabre, and actually following the draft, many media outlets and newspapers picked up on it and published Taro Sugimoto in the paper and said he was selected. And so they kind of thought it was funny, and it was really this insider thing. I don't even think the owner of the Sabres knew that it was fake. It was really just the general manager and a few scouts that knew that it was fake. So they kept the gag going for a while. Media and reporters would inquire, right? It was very interesting. Oh, who's this Japanese player? He's the first Japanese player drafted. And they kept the joke going for a while. They, told people, oh yeah, he might not come over this year, but if he comes over, we still retain his rights. And actually at one of the training camps, the Sabres actually created a stall, put a jersey, a 13 Sugimoto jersey in a stall, and kept the gag going for a fairly long time. And actually, too, if you go to a Sabres game, it's you'll probably see at least one Sugimoto jersey. I think Sugimoto, sometimes he's wearing 13, which is, I think, technically his number that he was given, and then 74 for his draft year. But it's very common to see Sugimoto jerseys at Sabres games. He's kind of this folk legend at this point in Buffalo and in Sabres history. So yeah, they kept the joke going. I think there's a story, I think I read in Taro Lives, Confessions of a Sabres Hoaxer. There was actually this moment where they kind of set up this Japanese guy in a restaurant to kind of convince the Sabres owner that he was a real person. But they kept the joke going a while, and eventually people, right after so many times, okay, where's this Taro? Where is he? And he never showed up. I think people eventually caught on. And eventually the Sabres admitted that Taro Sugimoto was not a real person. So now actually in NHL history books, the 183rd selection in the 1974 draft is just listed as invalid claim. So his name has been erased from the official record, but he still lives in the hearts and minds of Buffalonians and Sabres fans and hockey fans in general. So he's an invalid claim. So technically, it was an invalid claim. But for years before it was discovered, he was actually listed in NHL draft books. So yeah, legacy. I think really Taro. He's this folk legend, or he's this kind of he's folklore. Or he's right a legend. I think Sabres fans. He quickly became an inside joke for Sabres fans, and I think maybe the lore of him has died down. I think as maybe the generations have passed, but in the odd, Sabres fans would frequently, chant "We want Taro, we want Taro" when games would get out of hand. So whether the Sabres were blown out or maybe they were bored, kind of like the same way fans do the Waves, it just kind of organically happens. Back in the day, they would start "We want Taro, we want Taro" chants, "We want Taro," and that was one thing I think. Just in my research, the Phantom Sign Makers were this pretty infamous group of Sabres fans. There was a group of I think 4 or 5 guys that would religiously every game hand paint these long murals, 20, 30 feet long banners, and hang them over the rafters. This was a time in the odd when there wasn't corporate advertisements everywhere. There was actually blank space, and I think they said that there was like this canvas right at the top of the oranges, which were the 300 section or the top section of the odd. There's this section, there's just a blank canvas. They'd hang their sign that would just say Taro says, and the Taro, it would change from game to game. So if they were playing someone, maybe they were playing a team, and they'd make a punny joke about one of the players on the team, or maybe they just do something random. But they had kind of new witty punny comments that said Taro says, and some of them I guess were a little too edgy. So sometimes if they pushed the line of what was politically correct in the day, or they might have security guards actually, come force them to take the signs down. So they were kind of this, kind of like punk rock fans of they would just, hang up these Taro says banners. And as a millennial, it's kind of before my time, but it was actually hilarious to like research that there's this group of fans that, and I think they maintained a book, the Phantom Sign Makers book, that had a list of all the signs they ever made. So. Taro, he's quickly become kind of a legend amongst Sabres fans. I mean, you'll still see Sabres jerseys, but also, between the "We want Taro" chants and, the Taro says signs, he's a part of Sabres folklore. So that's kind of an overview of Taro Sugimoto and his story. And again, his 70th birthday is coming up. He was born, November 16th, 1954. So his 70th birthday is quickly approaching, and I don't know if anyone's aware of it, his birthday. I don't know if there's anything planned or anything, but I'll be launching a song about Taro Sugimoto, and to kind of pay homage to his legacy. And I think one of the funniest things too about Taro is actually, he was a fake pick. But there was actually some legitimate players that ended up playing in the hockey league that got drafted after him. So there's a couple of players that went on to play, many games and went on to win some Stanley Cups of players that were drafting him. So I think people have lamented that it was a wasted draft pick, but I think just the legend, maybe the cultural capital that it created for Sabres fans was maybe worth it. So yeah, that's a little bit about Taro Sugimoto. Okay, so let's see. We got some comments here. Well, I've heard many great things happen in 2004, like the first ever SpongeBob movie and The Incredibles heading to theaters. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin again. So I think today's topic that I'm going to try to pull apart is today is obviously the election day. So I think as Americans, we are, very familiar with the fact that once every 4 years we elect a new president. Right? It's something cyclical. It's, and Bitcoin is something similar in that every 4 years, or roughly every 4 years, there's this halving event, which is something that happens every 4 years. So I'm going to kind of, the fact that we have kind of awareness of, right? If you think of America, America's just a protocol, right? It's a set of rules and procedures. So you have things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So right in our Constitution, it's written that every 4 years, the electorates should elect a person. So it's kind of written, if you think of the Constitution as like the code base of America, it's like the operating code that's in there. So every 4 years, right, we go through this thing that's written in the protocol of this should happen, and it does. And Bitcoin is something similar, and I think maybe that's the best way to kind of analogize what the halving is. So while America has a presidential election every 4 years, Bitcoin roughly every 4 years has a halving event. So let me take that apart. So the halving, right, written into the Bitcoin protocol is halvenings. So what's a halvening? So Bitcoin supply, again, written in the protocol, is that it has a fixed supply of 21 million. So there are 21 million coins that will ever be, or 21 million, that is capped. And written in the Bitcoin protocol is an algorithm that says how the 21 million coins will be distributed, right? So I think when Satoshi Nakamoto was inventing Bitcoin, right, one of the challenges that really he faced was, okay, 21 million coins fixed supply, how do we distribute those? Do we just on the day one launch all 21 million? So he just came up with, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason, but he came up with this halvening cycle. So essentially every 210,000 blocks, the mining reward gets cut in half. So you can think of 210,000 blocks as kind of similar to an American 4-year time period in 210,000 blocks. So essentially a block is every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin protocol kind of, you can think of, creates this little ledger in the sky of transactions. And every 10 minutes kind of encapsulates that into a block. And then that's one block. And then it does it again. So I think then one of the analogies I made is that Bitcoin is like, I think a simple way to think of it, it's a game, right? Bitcoin is a computer game. And it's just, right, a bunch of computers playing a math puzzle. And the computer that creates the best solution to the math puzzle or solves the math puzzle the best wins the prize. And the prize is the mining reward. So essentially you can think every 10 minutes. So, right, it's not exactly 10 minutes, but roughly every 10 minutes a block is created. So every 10 minutes there's like a new game. I think maybe you've been at a bar right before where there's like the New York Lotto screen. There's the Lotto game, and this game is playing for 10 minutes, then a new game starts. You can think every 10 minutes a Bitcoin block is created or a new Bitcoin game started. So all the computers in the network play the game. They're trying to solve a cryptographic puzzle, and the computer that comes up with the best solution or the longest hash, they win the prize or the reward. So how this works is essentially the Bitcoin protocol lays out that every 210,000 blocks, the reward, so the mining reward that the computers will win, gets cut in half. So when Bitcoin was first created, the mining reward was 50 Bitcoins. So every block, all the computers were playing for a reward of 50 Bitcoins. And that was the mining reward. And then after 210,000 blocks, so after 210,000 iterations of that game, that reward got cut from 50 to 25. And then it started again. So the computers kept playing the game. And once they did another 210,000 times, that reward got cut in half again to 12.5. So that's the halvening. So it's very similar to, I think, presidential elections, right? The first president was George Washington, right? So George Washington served a term, 4 years, then another 4 years, and then a new president came in. So it's kind of very similar to that of, you can think of the 50 Bitcoin reward as like the George Washington of Bitcoin rewards, right? It was the first one, but this is set in stone. So this process, and right, a block, it takes about 10 minutes for a block. It's kind of the average time for a block. So roughly every 4 years, not exactly, but every 4 years, or it is exact, every 210,000 blocks, the reward gets cut in half. And that's how it's very similar to kind of the cyclical nature, I think, of American democracy, right? You can think of America as just a protocol, right? It's just a code, which is the Constitution, which prescribes how the government functions and the exact ways that it works, and then it just lays out in the code that every 4 years we elect a president. That's similar to Bitcoin of every 4 years, every 210,000 blocks reward gets cut in half. So we are currently, let me see if I can find this here. Whoa. So I think it's somewhere like 3.1. See if I can find a picture here of. Because yeah, it's important to know that this kind of halving reward will keep getting in half. So right now, so the last halving occurred in April 2024, and where the Bitcoin mining reward went from 6.25 Bitcoins to right now the mining reward is 3.125 Bitcoins. And then the next halving will be roughly in 2028 when the reward will be 1.5625 Bitcoins. And that reward will keep happening. I think, let's see if I can find a schedule, Bitcoin halving schedule. See if I can find a right, because I think that's one of the advantages of, or one of the things that makes Bitcoin different is that right, the supply is actually fixed, and not only is it fixed, it's transparent of how and when Bitcoin. Right, you can look through the schedule. You can look through the supply, right? So you think of Bitcoin and even just economics in general, right? It's supply and demand, supply and demand. So, right, the demand's hard to forecast, right? It's kind of imperfect, but the supply of Bitcoin is actually completely fixed. So the Genesis block, or the first block, was made in 2019 or 2009. Sorry. So on January 3rd, I think it was January 3rd, or the early days of 9. There's actually a gap of when Satoshi mined the first coin, and then there was like a gap. I don't know if he was setting up the network, but since he's launched, I think there's a saying of Bitcoin going tick-tock next block. Tick-tock next block, which essentially just means that every 10 minutes the Bitcoin just keeps going. There's really no one forcing it to. And that's where, right, one of the things that's Bitcoin, what makes it different is the fixed scarcity. So you think of, right, supply and demand. Supply it's scarce, right? Anything else, gold is super scarce, but if demand for gold increases, you can mine more gold, right? You can invest in new technologies. You can go explore and find new gold mines. But for Bitcoin, it's 21 million, and there's no way to change that. It's fixed in stone. So here's an example of some of the halvening. So right, we're in 2024, and the last halvening was in April, and the reward is 3.125 Bitcoins. So now in 2028, the reward, or the block reward, will get cut in half again to 1.5625 Bitcoin. And then in 2032, 0.78125 Bitcoin. And then 2036, 0.390625 Bitcoin. 2040, 0.1953125 Bitcoin. 2040, which this will be the first time that actually less than 0.1, but so 2044, 0.09765 Bitcoin. Right, so you can just see that this every 4 years the reward's getting cut in half. So Bitcoin, while the supply is fixed at 21 million, that's all it'll be, it's actually becoming scarcer over time because the amount of coins being distributed is getting cut in half every 210,000 blocks. So to give you an idea of how scarce Bitcoin will be, let's zoom out to, 50 years from now. So, right, it's 2024. In 2074, right, so in roughly 2072, a halving will occur. And at that point, the Bitcoin reward, right, so all the computers in the Bitcoin network will all be playing a Bitcoin game for a reward of 0.00009536 Bitcoin, or 9,536 Satoshis. So it's, by today's standards, very small amount of satoshis, right? 9,536 satoshis, or 0.00009536 bitcoins, is the reward that all the computers in the Bitcoin protocol will be playing for. And I think there's a quote that human beings were not really able to right fully understand exponents, right? So whether it's exponential growth or exponential halvings, it's just something. And then, right, again, even the concept of like a billion, human minds can't really intuitively, like, we can get, oh, there's a word a billion, but we can't fully wrap around how big a billion is. I think it's similar to this halving. It's kind of hard for people to understand what that means if something's getting cut in half every, right? If it just keeps having. So yeah, the Bitcoin, yeah, it's happening. I think that's something, right? I think there's the common, right? It's commonly said that Bitcoin is volatile, which, yes and no. So, Bitcoin itself is actually not volatile. It's actually the inverse of volatile. It's completely stable. And I know that sounds bizarre because, right, I think the conventional thinking is that Bitcoin is volatile. But Bitcoin is actually completely and programmatically, algorithmically, perfectly stable, right? It's 21 million forever. So it's fixed. It's completely fixed. It's kind of, one way to think of it is like kind of the discovery of like a physical constant, right? But not in the physical world, but in the digital world. So 21 million fixed coins. So really when people think Bitcoin's volatile, right, they're really talking about the US dollar price of Bitcoin. The US dollar price of Bitcoin is volatile. So it's the US dollar price of Bitcoin. I think I've made a conscious attempt to not talk about Bitcoin price. I find, right, it's interesting, but I think, one, there's a lot of content on the internet about, price, what's the price going to be. And two, I don't think it's, so the internet's flooded with content about the price, the USD price, right? So there's already people talking about price. That's why I kind of try to not to talk about price. And the second part is that I just don't think it's focusing on the price isn't it's interesting, but it's far from the most interesting thing about Bitcoin, the whole crypto movement. So again, when people say Bitcoin's volatile, they really just mean that the US dollar price of Bitcoin is volatile. So what's the US dollar price of Bitcoin? So the US dollar price of Bitcoin is just the amount that the market value of what the market is willing to exchange US dollars for Bitcoin is at that moment of time. And that, yes, is very volatile. And why is that volatile? It's volatile because of demand, right? So again, price is determined supply and demand, right? It's from economics. It's the supply curve, it's the demand curve, and where these curves meet is where the price is, right? If there's a lot of something, but not many people want it, it's a low price. But if there's very little of something and a lot of people want it, then the price goes up. So it's, right, economics, it's kind of a pseudoscience. It's complex, but simple at the time. It's just supply and demand. So again, the US dollar price of Bitcoin is volatile, and it's volatile because people are irrational, right? People aren't algorithmic. People don't think exponentially. They can't think exponentially halving or growth-wise. And I think that's where the volatility comes, is the amount that human beings are willing to trade US dollars for Bitcoin at any one point in time is extremely volatile. But when you think of the actual Bitcoin protocol itself, it's completely stable, right? As the halving algorithm lays out, we can see out to 2136, right? We have a good idea 100 plus years in the future what every 10 minutes, what the reward will be. So, right, 100 years from now, so 2124, so 2124, there will be a halving where the Bitcoin reward will be 0.00000009 Bitcoin. So 9 Satoshis, right? And let me say it again because there's lots of zeros, right? So 0.00000009 Bitcoins. So here we are in 2024, and we can look out 100 plus years in the future, and and know with certainty for all intents and purposes, right? There's always things that could happen, right? The Bitcoin network could be hacked. We could have a comment, take out the entire computing network in the world. It's possible, but we can say with high likelihood that if the Bitcoin network is still operating and still functional, 100 plus years from now, the Bitcoin mining reward will be 9 satoshis. So, right, it's completely transparent. It's math, and I think, right. So, just coming back to the idea of it's not volatile. Bitcoin's actually it's the invention of complete absolute stability. Right, 21 million. Where we can project out. We know what the supply is now. We won't know what it will be 10 minutes from now. We know what it will be 10 years from now. We know what it will be 100 years from now. And the demand is much more complicated. I can't tell you what the demand of Bitcoin will be. No one can. We can speculate. We can look at and okay, maybe I will speculate about demand. I think, right? So I think when we're examining Bitcoin demand, right? You have to think about, I guess I'll just pose a couple questions. Do you think there will be more or less internet users in the future? Yes or no? I'm from the school of thought that there will be more internet users or the internet will continue to grow. So that's one. And then I think, right, the idea of, right, so that's one thing is do you think, I think it's Metcalfe's law, which is kind of when you're valuing a network, right? The value of a network is equal to the number of users of the network squared. So each user that enters a network doesn't just have a +1 effect on the network. They actually they square the network, which is kind of, let me try to explain it simply, but like, I think the one analogy they make is like a telephone network. So if you and a friend have phones, you have two people, they can call you and you can call them. But if a third person enters the network, so you have 1, 2, 3, you and your friend can still call each other, but you can each call that person can each call you. So one person joined the network, but there's actually, right, 4 more connections. You can each call them and they can each call you. So one person kind of has this exponential effect on the network. I think that's one way to think of, if you think the Bitcoin network, right, that's all Bitcoin is. It's a network. It's a network of computers that are playing a computer game and a network of users, both human and what's looking like emerging artificial intelligence agents of actually using the network. So we'll just define as users as wallets. So actually each person that buys has an exponential in fact. So I don't think it's knowing that supply is actually being constricted. And I think it's fair to say that demand will increase. I think it's likely that Bitcoin price will go up. And I don't want to, again, talk about the price, but I think, I don't think the market has fixed in, or I don't think it has adjusted or fully accounted for the halving effect, which is this exponential decrease in supply over time. I don't think that is I don't think the market is operating with that awareness. And just to be transparent, this isn't financial advice. And yeah, don't take my financial advice. Do your own research. But yeah, this is just talking about technology. And I think really in Bitcoin, it's just one network, right? So Bitcoin is kind of the invention of, it's this, right, again, a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. And it kind of applies that to money, right? So its first attempt was money, but it's kind of spawned this whole other ecosystem, which is the Web3 crypto ecosystem, which is really just, right, and it's applying blockchain or the solution to the Byzantine general problems to other problems, right? So Bitcoin, money is a good first use case for blockchain because, right, it's about a peer-to-peer network to solve the issue that for two people to trust each other, they need to have a third person in the middle that they both trust. Well, money's had that problem, right? Because, money is a good first use case, but there's lots of other things where we have to trust third parties. One example is lawyers, right? When you or contracts, anytime you enter into agreement, whether that's, marriage or property or really any sort of contract, an employment contract, there's a contract, right, which just says these two parties agree to this, but that's usually stored at a third location. So each person in that contract has a copy of it, but then they usually they file it at the county clerk, or they file it with the marriage officer of their county government. But because why do they do that? Because if two people shook hands, came to agreement, wrote it on paper, right? Either of the sides could lose the paper, and then there'd be a dispute of that's not what I wrote down, or either of those parties could fudge the numbers. So I could go home with my contract, white out, and print out a new contract and forge it, which is why kind of historically humanity's had this third party, right? If me and you sign a contract, but then we file it with the clerk, then if either of us fudge our contract and there's a dispute, we can just go to the clerk and say, okay, well, what did we file with the clerk? What's that say? And that more or less works because, okay, that's good. We can trust this person in the middle, and they can, we can trust them, and then we can resolve disputes. The problem then comes with that you trust that third party, right? So that third party, the clerk, could actually fudge the numbers, or they could fudge the contract, which, I think most of the time they don't, but we've had many examples throughout history where that's actually just the case. And I think, the one big one is Enron, right? A bunch of people just trusted Enron, and Enron was violating trust of people. And, there's many other examples, both micro and macro, of this third party, this middle person being trusted, and that party violates the trust because you got to trust them. There's no way to keep them accountable, and that's where the birth of And Bitcoin is just math, and blockchain really, all these other cryptos, whether it's Ethereum, Solana, Chainlink, Sui, there's so many of them. They're all trying, right? I think Ethereum's one. They're essentially, as high summary, trying to apply they're trying to apply blockchain to smart contracts, and then that has use cases. There's all the other cryptos that are essentially just tinkering, and we'll see. It's kind of, you can think of, I think there's the term of Web3. So crypto, whether it's blockchain or all these cryptos, are just really a new iteration of the internet where, and if you think about today, the problem, this Byzantine general problem where we come in is, I think a good example is like a Facebook, right? We all, not all of us, but many of us have Facebook accounts, and we are individual users, and we interact peer to peer on Facebook, but we all save our data with Facebook, right? We save our names, our passwords, our personal information with Facebook, and we trust them with our data. But what's the problem there is, Facebook behind the scenes, they're allowing you to interact peer to peer with your friends, but they're taking your data and they're monetizing that information, right? They have information about everybody. They have large data sets about any geography, any type of person, and they take all that data, aggregate, and sell it to make money. That's the business model. And I think it's very likely, and I think you will see, some sort of crypto social network where users actually own their data, right? So, and that's the problem is once these networks achieve scale, so like a Facebook, they own your data, right? So all your friends are on Facebook. You can't just take your data with you and go somewhere else. They have they own your data. You are you, and it's your data, but they own it. Where I think crypto, they're really just starting to build these rails between different sites and throughout the internet that users can kind of flow from place to place as they want and carry their data with them. So the other analogy I like to think of is like your address, right? So you as a user, as a human being, you have like an address, right? A place that you lay your head at night, or at least by government standards, you have a mailing address, right? And that's cool. We all have a mailing address, and it's our mailing address, right? You live where you live. It's where you live. But when you move, it's then on the user to update every single agency you interact with where you live, which is kind of ridiculous, right? It shouldn't be on them, but if you move, you have to tell the post office you move. You probably have to tell your banks that you have a new address. You have to tell your utility companies, all your friends and family to send postcards to this new address. And it's on you to change your address is saved 1,000 different places, let alone where Facebook sold your address to, right? Where blockchain is really taking that power back to the user and saying, this is your address. You can change your address in your wallet or in your database, and then it's on all the other networks to come to you to find where your address is. That's kind of one example of essentially, and I'm hopeful that will kind of lead to this democratization of data, not in really increasing openness and fairness and leveling the playing field on the internet, because I think the internet's a new terrain. Yeah, that's kind of some ramblings of Bitcoin. But yeah, in summary, yeah, Bitcoin, just like U.S. democracy, just like the American protocol, right? And the protocol is just the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the American protocol has a 4-year cycle of presidential elections. The Bitcoin protocol has a similar 4-year cycle or around halving, and it's prescribed, and it's very similar. Yeah, Bitcoin is volatile, but it's also not. So, right, Bitcoin is completely perfectly scarce and completely perfectly stable. But it's the US dollar price. So it's the price at which the market and actors in the market are willing to trade US dollars for Bitcoin is volatile. It is volatile because of the demand side, not because of the supply side. The supply side is perfectly fixed, perfectly scarce. But it's the demand of how many people, right? How many people at any point in time want to trade dollars for Bitcoin, but also, what are they willing to trade? So there's lots of the demand side is what brings the volatility to, and unfortunately, demand in every industry, not just Bitcoin, but anything, whether it's stocks, bonds, houses, food, demand fluctuates wildly, and those industries, the supply is also not perfectly scarce, right? Even food's an example of demand for food can increase or decrease, but also the supply of food is not constant. It's not fixed. We could have a drought and then the supply decreases, or we could have a bountiful harvest and the supply increases. So Bitcoin is actually simpler economics of that. We know with certainty what the supply is. We got to find out the demand. So yeah, there's a couple ramblings. So let's move on to. So yeah, I talked about Taro Sugimoto. Talked a little bit about Japanese music and the Bitcoin halving. Let's do a little Buffalo Bills analysis. So let's see. This past week, the Buffalo Bills played the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins, it was an AFC East battle. And I want to say battle because in the NFL and division games, they're tougher because you play each other twice a year every year. So you play them at home and away. So you kind of each team almost constructs their rosters specifically at first just to beat their division rivals, because you know they're going to play them. So they're tough. So even though the Dolphins, I think, had a 2-5 record coming in, right, and the Bills had a winning record, so on paper it looked lopsided. It was actually a very close game. So the Bills ended up winning on a 61-yard field goal from Tyler Bass. Tyler Bass is the kicker he's been struggling, right? He's been struggling for a while. And it was really a cool moment of, him hitting this, right? 61 yards is a very long kick, and he hit it. And I don't know how many people were confident, but it was kind of this cool moment of, as a team, I think even Bills fans, right? They've been really frustrated just because they don't have confidence in him. But, we don't hate Tyler Bass. He's our kicker and we want him to succeed. He's made some big kicks. He's been well in the past. He's just kind of been going through, I think they call it in football the yips. But he's been struggling, and he nailed a 61-yarder at the end. And I guess some analysis. I think, I think the Bills, by winning this, it kind of, right. We haven't won the division yet, but it's made it very likely, with high probability that we will win the division. Right, we're 7-2 now, and I think the Jets are next at 3-6. So we have a very high lead. So it's looking likely. I think, right now the Bills really have to compete for, if we could get the 1 seed, right? The Chiefs won, and they continue to win. They don't look good, but at the same time they win. They just win, and that's kind of the signal of a good team, is they just win no matter what. So they're 8-0 now. The Bills are 7-2. So we play them in a couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting because I think that's kind of now the Bills got to turn their attention to getting the 1 seed, right? We've never been able to do it, and the 1 seed is such an advantage because you don't have to play in the wild card round. So if we can win, get the 1 seed, we can sit out the first week and go straight to the second week, which is one big because you get to rest all your players. So anybody dealing with injuries has a week off to rest and recuperate, and you don't expose your players to injury in the playoff game when it's a tough, hard game, because usually the wild card weekends, right? The playoff teams, all the teams are good. Some are better than others, but you made the playoffs. You're at least a halfway decent team. So that'll be interesting in 2 weeks. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I don't know. We haven't really beat elite teams yet. I think, right? We lost to the Ravens. We lost to the Texans, who are both good teams. We've ended up having kind of this easier schedule where, which is good. But and I think even in the past, like we've had some games where we lose to bad teams. I think it's big too. The Bills did not play good on Sunday against the Dolphins. We actually probably technically played worse than the Dolphins. The Dolphins played a great game, but right, the margin of error is so small, and good teams just win. And even we didn't play well, but we still pulled it out, which is what good teams do. So we'll see. It's optimistic, right? And I think we have a chance, but I don't know. I don't know if we're the favorite this year, but we've got a chance, and that's at this point, especially with Josh Allen as our quarterback, and our franchise being pretty solid. It's not about going all in any year. It's about having multiple years where we have a shot, and hopefully you pull it out one year. So hopefully we can pull it out this year. But being a Bills fans, you can't be too optimistic. So that's a little bit of Bills rambling, and I guess maybe I'll comment. We got about five minutes left here. Drop in the comments if you'd like to, what you'd like to see. So on future shows. I don't even know what the politics are, but I think this election, I guess now with the election, I guess I'm in a vacuum here. I don't know what the results are. I don't know who's in the lead. I'm just kind of in this black room talking on the internet. But I think, I don't know. I would love to see our country at some point come together. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, but no matter who wins, I think I still believe in the American dream, and I don't know if it's a dream or this experiment of right. I think I'm just hopeful and maybe optimistic that we can turn a corner, and no matter who wins, I don't know. I think that we can come together as a country, because we feel very divided. I think we're all kind of aware how we feel divided, and I think that's kind of right. The part of the American experiment is that we are divided, right? We're a collection of very different cultures, different people. I think other nations have the unique advantage, or I don't know if it's advantage, but they have a cultural history. And I mean, we do too, but we're a nation of immigrants, refugees. We all have different cultures. That's kind of the beauty of America. Whereas like other countries, I don't know, for Poland, like example, right? They've been there thousands of years. They've fought off common invaders. They have, a shared history. Whereas Americans, right? Some of our family histories have been here hundreds of years. Some of us are descended from slaves. Some of us immigrated, within the last 10 years. We're kind of a melting pot, I think is the analogy. And that's never been done before, right? It's kind of unique. And I think I would love to see, right? We're divided because we have so many different opinions, so many different ways of being. And that's kind of the beauty, but it's the same as kind of the weakness, right? It's easy to divide us. And I kind of would just like to see our country, right? It's kind of up to us too now of this, to kind of make the American dream keep going. Because I don't know. I think the white picket fence days are gone, but maybe it could be something else. I think America still has a place in the world, especially when you see other countries and what's going on in the world. I think we have kind of a responsibility to pivot or to, I don't know. We've kind of become this, right, this warmongering military industrial complex where we go around the world, starting wars in the name of democracy, but is it really? And I think, I don't know. I think one of the interesting things about history is that there's no, the way things are or were was not, didn't have to be that way. So it's up to us, and it's right. History is ever evolving and ever changing, and we're kind of the ones that write it. So, win or lose, whether your side wins or lose, I hope that there's no violence and that right, we have a peaceful transfer, and whether your side won or lose, we can rally behind our president, because right, we have a shared president, so whether you voted for whoever wins today or you didn't, I would just hope that we can at least give whoever comes in office a chance, and then support them. And obviously we have to be very aware of where we could be headed, but I think it's just important for us to try to come together now, because I think we all need it. And I think that's kind of our strength, is that we're diverse. We have many different ideas, ways of thinking, and it's kind of the sum of our parts that makes us so strong. So those are some ramblings. So again, Taro Sujimoto's 70th birthday is coming up Sunday the 16th. The Bitcoin halving is similar to the U.S. presidential cycles, and go Bills. So thanks for tuning into my show, and until next time, this is Metachewy signing off. Okay, bye.